It's Thursday here in Eugene, which means the Ducks are getting closer to their weekend matchup against the Washington State Cougars. Mario Cristobal gave us tons of injury updates yesterday regarding some players that could be available this game, and then kind of big picture looking at the season. We got a list of them right here, so just kind of wanted to run through them and then give some of my thoughts as far as what their absence or potential return kind of could mean to this team. Starting off, running back Sean Dollars. He's a guy that people might have forgotten about this year just because Oregon's been so dominant on the ground. Excuse me. So dominant on the ground. And, Travis Dye is doing really well. We're seeing Byron Cardwell get involved. Mario Cristobal is saying, and I quote, "Well, I think Sean is going to be available at some point this year. It could be at the end, could be in the postseason." So, I mean, we're still kind of, it sounds like, waiting in limbo to see when he might be available as far as, what I think his return would mean to this team. He's a guy that we've been really excited about. We saw him flash at various moments last year for the Ducks. But with the way that the Ducks have been operating on offense, I feel like Travis Dye has that, has that number one role locked down, and he's been playing tremendous football. Byron Cardwell, like we talked about a while ago, 16 carries in that Washington game. I think that the staff is more than confident in him. As far as Dollars coming back, I mean, we haven't really seen McGee or Benson get super involved of late, so I'm not sure how much of a difference that would make in the rotation, but either way, I think it would be valuable to get him back, especially if this team can make a run into the postseason. You always want to have that depth, and then getting him some snaps for next year as well. And then Justin Flo, big name, right? Linebacker, went down during the Fresno State game. There was a report that he was going to be out for the duration of the regular season. And then Mario Cristobal telling us that his return is going to look more like it's coming in the spring. So just with how much the Ducks have had to shift pieces around in the linebacker core, I think his return would have been pretty big. Basically like we were saying with the postseason, like with Sean Dollars, I think if he came back, it would be tremendous value for this team. He was slated to be a starter, and it was looking really promising alongside Noah Sewell. One of the biggest ones I'd say that came from this one, safety Bennett Williams. Cristobal was asked about him potentially being available this year, and he said there's a chance. So and that got people pretty excited really quickly. I tweeted out a picture of Williams and that quotation basically just saying that there's a chance that he'll play this year. And I think that this is the biggest, impactful return that we could potentially see this season. You look at how the Oregon defense was excelling at the beginning of the year, just forcing turnovers at an unreal clip, led the nation at one point. And it's no slight to the Oregon secondary, but it just hasn't been the same since Williams went down. They've tried to slide some pieces around. They got Jordan Happel, who snagged an interception last week against Washington. Brian Addison's getting some reps there. And then you also look at Damon David, the true freshman. He's getting a little bit of run there. So the Ducks have some names that could fill in there, but Williams was a really experienced guy. It's hard to fill in for that football IQ and just, the instincts and the athleticism that he had. He was also a super, super reliable tackler. A lot of times when you look at guys in the secondary, sometimes when they're making a lot of tackles, it's because they're caught out of position. So the guys that they're covering are getting the ball. But I just feel like Williams was always in the right spot at the right time. And he was forcing a lot of really big plays, making a lot of really big plays for the Ducks this season. So we'll see if he can return. I mean, him and Verone McKinley were definitely a really good combo. And then you look at Mikael Wright and DJ James, Triquez Bridges and Dante Manning all getting a lot of significant playing time this year. So that's a pretty good secondary, but adding Williams back would be huge. Jackson LaDuke, linebacker. I think he's someone that, again, we really haven't heard too much about. I think he had a lot of buzz, in the offseason. The staff always had good things to say about him. Kind of an underrated recruit, but when he got here, I feel like he's made a name for himself, and he looks like he's, in pretty good shape from what we can see when he's walking around the facility. And this is what Cristobal had to say. He said, LaDuke is really close. LaDuke is already practicing with us, so we think he's maybe a week out. If you had to list him for this week, he'd be questionable. If you had to list him for next week, he's a go. So, I mean, even if he can't play against Washington State, talk about a huge game for the Ducks against Utah next week on the road. I really doubt that he would start in a situation like that, but given how, I don't want to say shallow, but just how stretched this linebacker depth has been this year, it would be a really big addition to have him back as the Ducks look to finish out this regular season, pursuing that Pac-12 title. Who else do we have here? Defensive lineman Keon Ware-Hudson. He missed the Washington game. I asked Cristobal about him and kind of how he's doing, and this is what he had to say. He was a little bit banged up last week. We thought we were going to get him. We were going to get to the game and that he could come play for us, and he's in a much better state this week. He's really played well. He's played through some nicks and some bumps or whatnot and has been a great player for us this year. Credit to him and his toughness. He looks like he's back on track. He's ready to go this week. So the Ducks defense played tremendous against Washington last week. Only 166 yards of total offense, hardly moving the ball at all on the ground. So that points a lot to some really strong interior line play. Brandon Dorless, Christian Williams, guys like that, Jason Jones, they all stepped up to make some big plays for the Ducks. And I think that we're seeing that depth on the defensive line really come into fruition now with guys like Jones and Christian Williams becoming a little bit more regular contributors. Keon Ware-Hudson has been a guy that has been raved about all throughout, spring practice and fall camp. And I feel like he's a name that when he does play, we're hearing his name more and more often. So he's contributing and he's making a difference for this Tim DeRuyter defense. Credit to Joe Salavea for the development there and getting him right. And then kind of a wild card from this bunch is linebacker Drew Mathis. I mean, it wasn't a whole bunch of an update, but when Cristobal was asked about him and if he might be able to return this year, he just said, I don't know. He said, I don't know. It's something we were looking into yesterday and we'll see. So, I mean, it's definitely a vague update, but just like I said, again, with LaDuke, with the depth at linebacker, I think that it would just be a tremendous help for this defense. I feel like I've said tremendous like 10 times, but it would be a really big help for this defense if Mathis is able to go again, just giving you some more depth there. And with the injury luck that this team's had this year, having another body there is certainly not going to hurt. And then I think one last name to kind of touch on here, Steve Stevens is probably the biggest guy that we're kind of waiting to see if he's going to be able to go or not this weekend against Washington State. You'll remember that he suffered a soft tissue injury, suffered a soft tissue injury against Colorado for Oregon's last home game. And then he was going to get he got reevaluated leading up to Washington. Cristobal said there was a chance that he was going to play, but then he wasn't ultimately able to go. And then we saw Jordan Happel step in his absence. So based on what we've heard out of Eugene this week from Cristobal and DeRuyter didn't really comment on the status of Steve Stevens, but he was talking about how important Jordan Happel is going to be to this defense and how it looks like his role is going to expand and he's going to be playing a lot for the Ducks as they move forward. So that's all we have for this one. Ducks face Washington State Saturday around 7:30 at Autzen Stadium. We got tons of preview content going up on ducksdigest.com. New podcast just dropped. The Ducks Digest podcast previewed this game with former colleague Brennan Green, Creme 2 sports director out in Spokane, Washington, covering the Cougs. So go give that a listen. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.